And in this new appointment with Panzironi, you explain the topic is really very important because we are talking about a hormone that is critical to the functioning of our body, of our metabolism, that is perhaps a little bit forgotten by official medicine. We are talking about, here it is, cortisol. So what can you tell us about it, Mr. Panzironi?
You are right, because cortisol is really one of the fundamental and most important hormones in our metabolism. Yet medicine seems not to give it the proper attention. Even think that excess cortisol is only identified in Cushing's disease, this syndrome. And instead, we underestimate the fact that more than 50% of people who are over 50 years old have severe cortisol alteration.
So let's begin to learn more about this hormone with this video.
Cortisol is a hormone that is produced by the adrenal glands in response to the pituitary hormone ACTH. It is also called the stress hormone because its production is strongly influenced by important psychophysical factors. Cortisol production follows a circadian variation. In fact, about 50% of cortisol is secreted upon waking, while it decreases almost completely during the night. Cortisol secretion is also stimulated by factors that can disrupt the normal production of this hormone, such as stressful events, excessive lowering of blood sugar levels, excessive physical activity, severe fasting, excessive immune system activity, or deficient melatonin production. When there is an excess of cortisol for medium to long periods, the circadian cycle is altered, and this causes a flattening of morning cortisol peaks and an elevation of nighttime basal levels of this hormone.
There you have it. This video basically made us realize that we have to pay attention to the alteration of the circadian of this hormone.
You are completely right, because precisely when we find that the circadian cycle is perfect in an individual, then this is also synonymous with good health. In contrast, when we have an alteration of this circadian cycle, that is, we have a lowering, then a flattening of the morning peak and an elevation instead of cortisol at night. When on the other hand is when it is lowest, then really there are big problems for our health.
So Panzironi, the optimal ranges for cortisol are 7 to 25 micrograms per deciliter during the morning and 2 to 14 in the afternoon. So this makes us realize that we have to be careful not to deviate from these values.
So, first of all, we have to tell our doctors to prescribe this kind of analysis, because unfortunately doctors tend not to do it. That they almost don't know what cortisol is for. This is a really crucial thing. Although I have to tell you that this range from 7 to 24, in short 25, is really excessive, because we are talking about almost 4 times the amount from the minimum to the maximum. So certainly we have to think about analyses that, to be correct, must in short be much lower. And then above all, it is important to do these analyses simply with saliva collection, but do it at different times of the day, just to try to understand if you have altered circadianity of this hormone.
Right. Right and straightforward what you're saying. So, if we have too much cortisol, we have hypercortisolemia. So let's go and understand what this hypercortisolemia is. Let's look at the video.
Hypercortisolemia, or excess cortisol, can turn this hormone from a great ally of our health to our worst enemy. In fact, excess cortisol is capable of altering many metabolic functions. For example, it induces increased cardiac output and thus may be responsible for hypertension. It increases blood glucose by stimulating hepatic gluconeogenesis through increased glucagon secretion and promoting protein catabolization. It alters immune defenses by acting especially in depressing the class of lymphocytes called Th1 lymphocytes. It reduces collagen and bone matrix synthesis, inducing pathologies such as osteoporosis and sarcopenia. Alters the circadian cycle by preventing the suprachiasmatic nucleus from activating melatonin production. It alters neurotransmitter production, inhibiting serotonin production, and thus being a major cause of depression.
Panzironi, the video was really very precise. He basically talked about metabolic alterations that then underlie so many diseases.
So, first of all, we obviously should not criminalize cortisol because we said it is really an important hormone. In fact, it is precisely what has allowed us for millions of years to have the energy needed, for example, to counter an attack by a person who wanted to kill us. All cortisol is critical to raise blood sugar where we have a blood sugar drop, or even prevent chronic inflammation from even killing us because the cortisol goes to modulate the immune system. But the problem is that when we have an alteration in its circadian, so an excess of it and an improper regulation of it, well, at that point, it becomes our worst enemy because it is able to alter a whole series of hormones, neurotransmitters, and go to interact with our whole metabolism.
Look, Panzironi, I am seeing here in your new book, Living to 120, the research, that you have dedicated just a chapter to pathologies related to hypercortisolemia.
Absolutely, yes, because there are thousands of studies that confirm how excess cortisol is able to make itself appear and therefore be a cofactor along with poor diet of all the diseases that we know today, starting with cancers, starting with the system, the alteration of the cardiovascular system, the problem of diabetes, the problem of autoimmune diseases, allergic diseases. In short, all diseases have an etiopathogenesis related to excess cortisol.
So-called official medicine tells us about stress and events that can obviously alter the production of this hormone, this cortisol. So should we blame our lifestyle for an excess of this hormone?
That would be too easy. But instead, the problem is that one of the main reasons for the alteration of our cortisol is precisely our diet. We have explained very often that when we eat carbohydrate-rich dishes such as bread, pasta, pizza, potatoes, rice and legumes, we go to induce the activation of insulin, which acts too violently, inducing a glycemic drop. At that point, we have an excessive production of cortisol that, yes, goes to restore our normal blood sugar, but goes to interact with a whole series of other precisely metabolic actions and induces all the pathologies we talked about earlier.
So thank you to our Adriano Panzironi, who again this evening delved into a really very important topic like cortisol.